Captain stood on the bridge of the steadfast horizon, watching the massive gates of space open before him. The metal structures were larger than any city on Earth, covered in glowing blue symbols that hurt his eyes to look at directly. Behind him, his crew remained silent. Everyone knew what this meant. No human had ever been allowed this far into alien territory before. "Captain, they're sending coordinates for the Imperial Palace," said Lieutenant Sung, looking up from his console. His young face showed excitement mixed with fear. "We're really doing this." Nodded but said nothing. What could he say? Their mission was simple in words but impossible in reality. Earth needed to establish a trade route through space. Without it, humanity would remain trapped in their small corner of the galaxy, unable to reach the resource-rich systems beyond. The problem was that the Empire controlled 3,000 worlds and viewed humans as barely more than primitive animals. The journey to Prime took 3 days. During that time, studied everything he could about culture. They were an ancient race, evolved from crystalline beings who lived for thousands of years. They valued logic above emotion, order above chaos, and tradition above innovation. To them, humans were mayflies, short-lived creatures who died before they could learn anything worthwhile. When the steadfast horizon finally docked at the Imperial Palace, felt his stomach tighten. The palace wasn't just a building. It was a structure the size of a small moon, carved from a single massive crystal that caught and reflected starlight in ways that seemed impossible. Guards waited at the airlock, each one standing perfectly still in armor that seemed to be made of living light. "Captain of Earth," one guard said in a voice like wind chimes, "you will follow. Do not touch anything. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not dishonor this place with your presence more than necessary." Bit back the angry response that rose in his throat. He had been a soldier for 20 years, fought in 3 wars, and earned his rank through blood and sacrifice. But here, he was nothing. Just another primitive hopping for scraps from the table of the great empire. The reception hall made Earth's greatest palaces look like children's toys. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds formed near the top. Thousands of nobles filled the space, all of them tall and elegant, their skin glowing with soft blue light. They wore robes that seemed to be made of captured starlight, and they moved with a grace that made humans look clumsy in comparison. Small diplomatic teams stood in the center of the hall like insects under a microscope. There were only 5 of them: Lieutenant Sung, Sergeant Jin Ho, Corporal Na, and Ambassador Sung's older sister. They wore their best dress uniforms, but compared to they looked dull and plain. The Emperor himself did not appear. Instead, a royal representative read a prepared statement about how the Empire would consider Earth's request for a trade corridor. Maybe, if humans proved themselves worthy. The words were polite, but the message was clear. Humanity had no real chance. After the formal ceremony ended, the reception began. Nobles approached the human delegation with the same caution people might show when visiting a zoo. They asked questions that sounded curious but felt insulting. How did humans cope with dying so young? Did they feel real emotions, or just chemical reactions? Was it true that humans still killed each other over resources? Answered each question with patience, though his jaw ached from keeping his anger hidden. Beside him, Jin Ho's fists clenched and unclenched, but the sergeant stayed silent. They all knew that one wrong word could end Earth's hopes forever. Then a general, clearly drunk on whatever substance his people used for recreation, pushed through the crowd. He was large for his crystalline skin showing cracks that suggested great age. "Why are we wasting time with these mayflies?" he said loudly. "They live for barely 100 years. They die before they can learn anything. They're emotional, violent, and stupid. We should send them home before they embarrass us further." The hall went quiet. Every eye turned to watch how the humans would respond. Knew this was a test. If he got angry, it would confirm everything they believed about humans. If he stayed silent, it would show weakness. He stepped forward, meeting the general's eyes. "You're right," said calmly. We do live short lives. Every human knows that from the moment we're old enough to understand death. Maybe that's why we try to make every moment count. We don't have thousands of years to waste, so we live with purpose. We love deeply because we know we'll lose the ones we care about. We fight hard because we know our time is limited. If that makes us mayflies, then I'm proud to be one. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, from a balcony above, someone began to clap slowly. Looked up and saw her for the first time, Princess, third in line to the throne. She was beautiful in a way that seemed impossible, her crystalline features perfect beyond anything nature could create. But her eyes were cold, showing the same distant curiosity that all had when looking at lesser species. "Well spoken, Captain," she said. Her voice carried across the hall without effort. "But words are cheap. Actions show true worth. Tomorrow you will have the chance to prove these claims in the arena of honor. Our champion will face you in combat. We shall see if human determination is real or just another pretty lie." The hall erupted in excited conversation. Felt his team tense around him. The arena of honor was legendary, a place where warriors proved their strength. No human had ever fought there before. No lesser species had. "I accept," said, not breaking eye contact with the princess. He saw something flicker in her expression, surprise maybe or interest. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that cold, perfect mask. That night, alone in his quarters, prepared for what would likely be his death. They were stronger, faster, and more durable than humans in every way. Their champion would be the best they had no real chance of winning. But he could show them what humanity meant. He could show them that courage wasn't about living forever. It was about standing up when you knew you might fall. He checked his equipment one last time and tried to sleep. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. The arena fight had not gone well. Lost, as everyone expected. But he had lasted 17 minutes against the champion, longer than any non in recorded history. He took his defeat with dignity, bowed to his opponent, and walked out on his own feet despite 3 broken ribs and a dislocated shoulder. The nobles had watched in silence and thought he saw something like respect in a few of their faces. 3 weeks later, the human delegation was still in space, waiting for the Emperor's decision. They had been moved to Nexus 7, a border station where they conducted trade negotiations with other species. It was a massive structure, home to over 10,000 citizens and workers. Princess had also been sent there on a diplomatic tour, though no one told the humans why she had really come. Was reviewing supply reports in his quarters when the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed throughout the station. His communicator burst to life with panicked voices speaking in multiple languages. He grabbed his weapon and ran for the command center. "What's happening?" he shouted as he burst through the doors. Sung looked up from his console, his face pale. "It's the swarm, Captain. They've breached the outer hull in 12 locations. Station defenses are already failing." His blood went cold. They were a nightmare species, creatures that attacked in overwhelming numbers with no regard for their own survival. They were savage, brutal, and completely unpredictable. They had kept them contained beyond the border for centuries, but somehow they had broken through. "Where's the princess?" asked. "Inner Sanctum, Sector 7, Jinho said, already strapping on combat armor. "Her royal guard is with her, but Captain, they are hitting that sector hard. It looks like they know she's there." That didn't make sense. They weren't smart enough for targeted attacks. They were pure instinct and hunger, but didn't have time to think about it. "Get everyone suited up. We're going in." "Captain, we're not authorized to," Nuss started. "I don't care about authorization," cut her off. "There are people dying, we help. That's what humans do." His team nodded. They had all fought together before. They trusted each other with their lives. Within minutes, they were armed and moving through the station corridors toward Sector 7. The station was chaos. Civilians ran in panic, something had never seen before. These were people who lived for thousands of years, who viewed death as a distant possibility, not an immediate threat. Now they were dying by the hundreds, and they didn't know how to handle it. The first they encountered was feeding on a fallen guard. The creature was as big as a horse, covered in black chitin armor, with mandibles that could tear through metal. It turned toward them with a shriek that made ears ring. Jin-Ho didn't hesitate. He fired his rifle in controlled bursts, aiming for the joints where the armor was weakest. The charged at them, incredibly fast despite its size. Nuh threw a plasma grenade that exploded against its side, creating a hole in its armor. Finished it with a shot to its exposed internal organs. "Keep moving," ordered. They ran through corridor after corridor, fighting at every turn. The creatures were everywhere and more kept coming. His team worked together like a machine, covering each other, calling out threats, never wasting ammunition. They had trained for urban combat and close quarters fighting. The guards they passed were trained for honorable duels and strategic warfare. They were dying because they couldn't adapt. When they reached Sector 7, they found bodies everywhere. The Royal Guard had made their stand here, and it hadn't been enough. Dead warriors lay in pools of glowing blue blood. Dead were piled 3 deep in some places, but the fighting was still going on deeper inside. Led his team through the carnage. They found the last of the Royal Guard making a desperate stand outside the sanctum doors. There were only 3 guards left, wounded and exhausted, trying to hold back a wave of. Behind the doors could hear screams. Princess was inside with the surviving civilians. "Form up," shouted. His team took positions alongside the guards. Together they fought, had fought in many battles, but this was different. They kept coming with no end in sight. For every one they killed, 2 more appeared. His ammunition was running low. His arms ached from firing his weapon. Blood ran down his face from a cut he didn't remember getting. Beside him, Sung went down with a claw through his stomach. The young lieutenant's eyes went wide with shock and pain. "No," shouted, but there was nothing he could do. Another was already lunging at him. Jin-Ho took it down, but 2 more replaced it. "We can't hold them," Nuh called out. She was right. They were about to be overrun. Made a decision. "Jin-Ho, Nuh, get to the sanctum. Seal the door behind you. I'll buy you time." "Captain, no," Jin-Ho started. "That's an order," roared. "Get the princess out. That's all that matters now." His team hesitated for only a second, then they moved. The remaining royal guards went with them, half carrying their wounded. Stood alone in the corridor as the sanctum doors began to close behind him. He fired his weapon until it clicked empty, then drew his combat knife. They kept coming. Then the doors exploded inward. A massive breacher, twice the size of the normal ones, smashed through like the metal was paper. It had been hiding, waiting for the right moment. It charged past straight for the sanctum where the doors hadn't fully closed. Didn't think, he just acted. He threw himself at the creature, stabbing his knife into the gap between its armor plates. The breacher reared back, trying to shake him off. Its claw came around and pierced his chest, punching through his armor like it was nothing. Screamed in pain but held on, stabbing again and again. The sanctum doors slammed shut just as the breacher threw against the wall. He hit hard and slid to the floor, unable to move. Blood poured from his chest. His vision was going dark. Through the sanctum window, he could see Princess's face pressed against the glass, her cold expression finally broken. She was screaming something, but he couldn't hear it anymore. The last thing saw before losing consciousness was Jin-Ho and Nuh dragging the princess away from the window. Good, he thought. They'll get her out. That's all that matters. Then the darkness took him and he knew nothing more. Far away, hidden in the shadows of the station's destroyed command center, something watched the carnage with satisfaction. The attack hadn't been random at all. It had been planned, designed to test something very specific, how far humans would go to protect others, even aliens who looked down on them. The answer was clear. They would go all the way to death itself. That kind of loyalty, that kind of sacrifice could be very useful, or very dangerous. The station's self-destruct sequence began counting down. The survivors had minutes to escape before the entire structure exploded. In the chaos, No one noticed the small ship slipping away into the darkness, carrying secrets that would change the galaxy forever. Woke to the sound of machines humming and the smell of something clean and sterile. His chest felt like it was on fire. Every breath was agony. He tried to move and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through his entire body, making him gasp. "Please remain still," a voice said. It was soft and musical clearly. "Your injuries were severe. Moving could reopen the wounds." Forced his eyes open. He was in a medical facility, surrounded by technology he didn't recognize. Doctors moved around him like ghosts in white robes. Through a nearby window, he could see the city of Prime spread out below. He was back at the Imperial Palace. "How long?" he managed to croak out. 3 weeks, the doctor said. "You should have died. By all our medical knowledge, you should have died within minutes of your injury. But you humans refused to follow logic. Your body kept fighting. It rebuilt tissue that should not be repairable. It adapted to damage that should be fatal, remarkable, and frustrating." 3 weeks, his mind raced. What had happened at Nexus 7, did his team make it out, was safe? As if reading his mind, the doctor continued, "Your companions survived. Sergeant Jin Ho and Corporal Na successfully evacuated Princess and 43 other survivors. Lieutenant Sung—" The doctor paused. "I am sorry. He died heroically." Closed his eyes. Sung had been only 25 years old. He had a younger brother back on Earth who wanted to be an officer just like him. Now would have to write a letter to that family, explaining why their son and brother was never coming home. "The princess has paid for your medical treatment," the doctor said. "All expenses. It is highly unusual. Royal favor is rarely granted to outsiders, especially humans. You should feel honored." But didn't feel honored. He felt tired and broken and old. He had lost one of his people. That was what mattered, not royal favor or political advantages, just the empty space where a good soldier used to be. Over the following days, slowly regained his strength. The doctors were amazed at how quickly he healed. What should have taken months took weeks. What should have left him crippled left him only weakened. They ran tests and asked endless questions about human biology, answered when he felt like it and ignored them when he didn't. On the 5th day after waking, Princess came to visit. She entered his room alone, without guards or servants. Tried to sit up in his bed, but she gestured for him to stay as he was. "Captain," she said formally, "I wanted to thank you for your sacrifice. You saved my life and the lives of many others. The Empire is in your debt." "Just doing my job," said. His voice was still rough from the breathing tube they had used. Tilted her head, studying him. "No, it was more than duty. You threw yourself in front of the breacher knowing you would die. Why? I am nothing to you. My life has no value to Earth's political interests. A logical being would have calculated that saving me was not worth the cost." Met her eyes. They were still cold, still distant, but there was something else there now. Genuine confusion. "You're right," he said. "It wasn't logical, but humans aren't always logical. I saw someone in danger who I could help, so I helped, that's all." "That's all," repeated. "You were willing to die for that's all." "Yes." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled a chair over and sat down beside his bed. "I want to understand," she said. "My people live for thousands of years. We have perfect memory. We can learn and grow and achieve great things because we have time, but we don't. We don't have what you showed in that corridor. We preserve ourselves above all else. The royal guard died because they couldn't imagine sacrificing themselves. Yet you, who will live barely a century, threw your life away without hesitation." "How, why?" Thought about his answer carefully. "Because life is short," he finally said. "We know we're going to die. Every human knows it from childhood. Maybe that's why we value life so much, our own and others. We know what it means to lose someone. We know that every moment matters. So when we see someone who needs help, we don't calculate the value. We just help. Because if we don't, who will? And if we only help when it benefits us, what's the point of living at all?" Absorbed this in silence. could see her mind working, trying to understand concepts that were foreign to thinking. She visited again the next day and the day after that. Each time she asked more questions. What did humans do with their short lives? How did they handle knowing everyone they loved would die? Did they fear death? Answered honestly. He told her about his family back on Earth, his mother who taught him to garden, his father who died in the war when was 12. He told her about his first love, a girl named who married someone else but who he still thought about sometimes. He told her about Jinho's terrible jokes and Na's habit of humming when she was nervous, and Sung's dream of seeing every star system in the galaxy. In return, began to open up. She told him about her life of perfect duty. She was born knowing she would live for 5,000 years or more. Every action was calculated for the long term. She had never formed a close friendship because didn't need such things. Emotion was inefficient. Attachment was illogical. She had existed for 300 years but wondered if she had ever truly lived. "Do you regret it?" she asked him one evening. "Knowing that you'll die young, that everything you build will crumble, that everyone you love will be lost." "Thought about it?" "No," he said. "I think knowing about death makes life more precious. When you have forever, nothing matters because you can always do it later. But when you know your time is limited, every sunrise is special. Every conversation matters. Every person you meet could be important. We burn bright because we know we'll burn out. And I think that's better than existing in the cold forever." Something changed in his expression. The coldness that always covered her features cracked just for a moment. Saw something underneath, loneliness maybe, or longing for something she couldn't name. It vanished quickly, but it had been there. After that conversation, started spending more time with. They talked about philosophy and war and art and music. She brought him human books from the palace library, things that had been collected over the years from captured ships and failed diplomatic missions. They read together and explained the parts that confused her, the parts about love and loss and hope and despair. One day, Jinho and Na came to visit. They told about the political situation. The High Council was debating humanity's status. Some argued that the sacrifice at Nexus 7 proved humans deserved respect. Others said it proved humans were emotionally unstable and dangerous. The debate was intense. But notice something. Had become humanity's champion in the imperial court. She argued for them with passion that shocked the other nobles. She spoke of courage and sacrifice and the value of connection, things the had long forgotten. She was risking her position, her reputation, maybe even her place in the royal succession, all for a species she had once viewed as barely worthy of notice. As grew stronger and prepared to return to duty, he realized something important had changed. Wasn't just curious about humans anymore. She was becoming human in the ways that truly mattered. She was learning to feel, to care, to live with urgency and passion. And he didn't know what that meant for either of them. The Grand Assembly was even more impressive than the reception hall had first entered months ago. 10,000 nobles filled the space, their glowing forms creating a sea of blue light. At the center, on a throne of pure crystal, sat the emperor himself. He was ancient beyond measure, his form so bright it was hard to look at directly. Stood with his team in the center of the assembly floor. They wore their dress uniforms, freshly cleaned and pressed. Jinho stood straight despite the burns he still carried from Nexus 7. Na kept her face neutral, but could see tension in her shoulders. Ambassador Sung stood tall, her diplomatic training keeping her calm even in this moment. They were the only humans in a room full of beings who had ruled the galaxy for. The Emperor's voice filled the space without seeming loud. "The question of humanity's worth has divided our council. Some argue you deserve respect for your sacrifice. Others say you are too emotional, too unstable, too short-lived to be trusted with equal status. Therefore, we shall settle this question the old way. You will face the trial of worth." Stomach tightened. He had read about the trial in the palace library. It was an ancient tradition, rarely used. 3 tests that proved a species' value. Many species had failed. None had passed in over 1,000 years. The first test is wisdom, the Emperor continued. You will face a problem that has puzzled our greatest minds for centuries. If you solve it, you pass. If you fail, the trial ends and humanity's petition is forever. A hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a complex mathematical and philosophical problem about the nature of consciousness and existence. Stared at it, his mind racing. He was a soldier, not a philosopher. He couldn't solve this, but could. She was one of Earth's leading philosophers, brought specifically for moments like this. Stepped forward and studied the problem. The assembly watched in silence as she thought. Minutes passed. Then she smiled slightly. The answer is that there is no answer, she said clearly. This problem assumes consciousness must be either purely logical or purely emotional, but that's a false choice. The question itself is wrong. Consciousness is both and neither. It exists in the space between logic and emotion, in the connections we make with others, in the experiences we can't quantify. Your philosophers have been trying to solve it as a math problem, but it's not. It's a human problem. The assembly erupted in noise. Some argued against her answer. Others debated whether rejecting the question counted as solving it. The Emperor raised his hand and silence fell. The answer is acceptable, he said. Humans understand that not all problems have logical solutions. This is wisdom of a different kind. The first test is passed. Breathed out in relief, 1 down, 2 to go. The second test is valor, the Emperor announced. One of you will face our greatest warrior in single combat. You need not win, but you must show the courage and spirit worthy of an honored species. Jin Ho stepped forward immediately. I'll do it, he said. His burns were still healing and knew he wasn't at full strength, but the sergeant's eyes were hard with determination. He had something to prove for himself and for Sung's memory. The champion was named, a warrior who had lived for 4,000 years and never lost a battle. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in crystal armor that seemed to be part of his body. He carried a weapon that crackled with energy. Jin Ho looked tiny next to him, armed with only a simple combat blade. The fight began, moved with impossible speed, striking at Jin Ho from all angles. The sergeant blocked, dodged, and rolled, using every trick he knew. But it wasn't enough. Within minutes, Jin Ho was bleeding from a dozen cuts. He was clearly outmatched. Any logical person would surrender. But Jin Ho kept fighting. He got knocked down and got back up. He took hits that should have ended the fight and kept moving forward. His face was set in determination that bordered on madness. He wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to show that humans never quit, never stop, never give up no matter how hopeless things look. Finally, knocked Jin Ho's blade away and held his weapon to the sergeant's throat. Yield, the champion said. Jin Ho, bleeding and exhausted, looked him in the eye. Make me, he said. The assembly went silent, stared at Jin Ho for a long moment. Then he lowered his weapon and stepped back. I have fought for 4,000 years, he said loudly. I have defeated champions from 100 worlds, but I have never faced someone who refused to accept defeat. This human has shown valor beyond mere skill. He fights not just with his body but with his spirit. That is something we have forgotten. The Emperor nodded. The second test is passed. But the final test was the hardest, the heart test. The Void Sanctum was a place of ancient technology that stripped away all lies and pretense. It showed people their true selves, every fear and failure and dark secret. Most beings couldn't handle it. Many went insane. Even nobles feared it. Who among you will enter? The Emperor asked. Stepped forward, I will. No, his voice rang out from her position among the royal family. Every eye turned to her. She had never spoken out in assembly before. Captain, you don't understand. The Void Sanctum has broken minds stronger than yours. You could. I understand, interrupted gently. But someone has to do this, and I'm willing to take the risk. He saw emotion on her face now, clear and unmistakable. Fear for him, care for him, maybe even something more. But he had to do this. For Earth, for his crew, for Sung who died believing that humans and could find common ground. The Void Sanctum was a small room of absolute darkness, entered alone. The doors sealed behind him. Then the visions began. He saw every mistake he had ever made, every soldier who died under his command, every order he gave that led to death. He saw Sung falling, heard his scream. He saw his father dying in the war while Young hid in a shelter. He saw walking away from him, choosing someone else. He saw all his failures, his fears, his regrets. The visions tried to crush him. They showed him the futility of his life. He would die young. Everything he built would crumble. Everyone he loved would be lost. His sacrifice at Nexus 7 changed nothing. The galaxy was vast and cold and didn't care about one human life. But then pushed back. Yes, he would die. Yes, his time was limited. But that didn't make it meaningless. He thought of his mother teaching him to grow tomatoes in their tiny garden. He thought of Jinho's laugh and Na's terrible cooking and Sung's excitement about seeing new worlds. He thought of learning to feel emotions for the first time, her cold face finally showing warmth. The darkness showed him pain but found the light within it. The connections, the love, the moments that mattered, that was what made life worth living. Not the length of it but the depth of it. The relationships, the sacrifices, the choice to care about others even when it hurt. Slowly the darkness retreated, stood in the center of the Void Sanctum, breathing hard but unbroken. The doors opened. He walked out to see the entire assembly staring at him in shock. Some were actually crying, something they almost never did. He survived, someone whispered. He faced the void and survived. The Emperor rose from his throne. For the first time his expression showed something like wonder. The trial of worth is past, he announced. Humanity has proven wisdom, valor, and strength of heart. They are worthy of equal status in the Empire. Let it be known throughout the galaxy, humans are our allies. The assembly erupted in applause, but barely heard it. He was looking at who was staring at him with her cold mask finally shattered completely. What he saw in her eyes made his heart race. This wasn't over. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. The celebration was unlike anything had ever seen. The royal gardens had been transformed for the event, celebrating humanity's elevation to allied status. Thousands of nobles mixed with the small human delegation. Music played, a blend of crystal harmonics and human instruments that someone had imported from Earth. The sky above was filled with fireworks, a human tradition that they had embraced with enthusiasm. Jinho stood nearby with Na, both of them trying exotic foods and making faces at the strange tastes. Ambassador was deep in conversation with a group of scholars, already planning exchange programs and cultural sharing initiatives. Earth's delegation was growing. More humans were arriving every day, excited about the opportunities this new alliance would bring, but felt oddly disconnected from it all. He stood at the edge of the garden, away from the crowd, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, his home. He had done what he came to do. The mission was successful beyond anyone's wildest dreams. So why did he feel so empty? "You're not celebrating," a familiar voice said. Turned to see Princess approaching. She wore robes of pure white that seemed to glow in the darkness, and her bioluminescent markings were brighter than he had ever seen them. She was beautiful, but that wasn't what caught his attention. It was her expression. The cold mask was gone. Her face showed real emotion now, nervousness, hope, and something else he couldn't quite identify. "Just thinking," said, "about everything that's happened, about Sung and the others we lost, about what comes next." Moved to stand beside him, looking up at the same stars. "I have been thinking too," she said quietly, "about the last few months, about what I have learned from you and your people, about who I was and who I am becoming." Waited. He had learned that chose her words carefully now. She was no longer the cold, logical princess who first dismissed humanity as mayflies. Something had changed in her, and he knew he was part of that change. When I first met you, she continued, I thought you were interesting the way one might find an unusual insect interesting. Something to study, something briefly entertaining. I had lived for 300 years and never felt anything beyond mild curiosity. Then I watched you fight in the arena. I saw you refuse to give up even when defeat was certain. I thought it was foolish. She paused and saw her hands trembling slightly. She was nervous, he realized. Princess, who faced down imperial councils without fear, was nervous talking to him. Then came Nexus 7, she said, her voice catching. I watched through that window as you threw yourself at the breacher. You were dying, bleeding out on the floor, and the last thing you did was look back to make sure we were safe. You smiled. You smiled as you were dying because you had saved us. I didn't understand it. I couldn't understand it. Started, but she held up a hand. Let me finish, she said, please. Over the past weeks, as I visited you in medical, as we talked and shared stories, I began to understand. You humans live with the knowledge of death every moment of your lives. And instead of making you cold and desperate, it makes you burn brighter. You love deeper because you know you'll lose people. You fight harder because time is precious. You sacrifice for strangers because every life matters when life is so short. She turned to face him fully now, her glowing eyes meeting his. You taught me something my people forgot thousands of years ago. You taught me that existing is not the same as living. They have perfected the art of existing. We will be here when stars die and new ones are born, but we don't live. We don't feel. We don't connect. We're like beautiful statues, perfect, eternal, and completely empty inside. Felt his heart pounding. What are you saying? I'm saying that you've changed me, said. Her voice was shaking now, showing emotion that would have been impossible for her months ago. For the first time in 300 years, I feel alive. When I'm with you, when I talk to you, when I watch you face impossible challenges with courage and humor and stubborn human determination, I feel something. Joy, fear, hope, longing. All these messy, illogical, wonderful emotions that my people discarded in favor of perfect order. She reached out and took his hand. Her touch was warm, and her bioluminescent markings pulsed with intensity that signaled deep feeling. In my culture, a royal may only marry someone they consider their equal in worth. For 300 years, I met no one who qualified. Every I knew was like me, cold, logical, emotionally distant. I thought that was what civilization meant, what advancement meant. His breath caught. He suddenly understood where this was going. But then I met you, continued. A human who will live barely a century. A warrior from a species my people dismissed as primitive. And I realized you are not just my equal. In the ways that truly matter, in courage, in compassion, in the capacity to love and sacrifice and live with purpose, you are superior to anyone I have ever known. She took a deep breath and could see tears forming in her eyes. Rarely cried. It required extreme emotion. Will you wed me? She asked. Her voice was soft but clear, carrying hope and fear in equal measure. Will you teach me to live as humans do, with passion, with purpose, with love? Will you show me what it means to truly be alive before the stars grow cold? I know I will outlive you by thousands of years. I know that loving you means I will have to watch you grow old and die. But I would rather have 50 years burning bright with you than 10,000 more years in the cold. Stood frozen, unable to speak. This was impossible. A princess of the most powerful empire in the galaxy was asking him, a soldier from a barely space-faring species, to marry her. The political implications were enormous. This wouldn't just be a wedding. It would be a symbol, a bridge between two civilizations. It would change everything. But as he looked at its face, at the tears running down her glowing cheeks, at the hope and vulnerability in her expression, all the politics faded away. He didn't see a princess or an alien. He saw someone who had found the courage to change, to feel, to risk everything for connection. Someone who reminded him why he fought in the first place. He thought of Sung, who died believing that humans and could find common ground. He thought of his mother teaching him that the most important things in life were the connections you made. He thought of everything had risked to advocate for humanity, to learn from them, to become something more than the cold, perfect statue she was raised to be. "Yes," said, his voice was rough with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." His face transformed. Pure joy spread across her features, an expression No had probably shown in. She threw her arms around him, holding him tight, held her back, feeling her shake with sobs that were part happiness and part relief. Around them, the celebration continued, but in that moment, it was just the two of them. Jin Ho was the first to notice. He nudged Na and pointed. Word spread through the celebration like fire. Nobles and human delegates alike stopped to stare at the princess and the captain embracing in the garden. Silence fell over the entire gathering. Then someone started clapping. It was Jin Ho, of course. Na joined in. Then, slowly, they began to applaud as well. The sound grew and grew until the entire garden was filled with it. Above them, the fireworks seemed to burn brighter, celebrating not just an alliance between species but a union between two people who had bridged an impossible gap. The wedding, when it happened 3 months later, was a spectacle that the galaxy would talk about for generations. Human and traditions blended together. Wore a combination of his military dress uniform and royal robes. Wore white and gold, with flowers from Earth woven into her hair. Jin Ho served as best man. Na stood beside. The emperor himself officiated. They spoke vows in both languages, promising to love and honor each other for as long as life lasted. It was that final part that made many nobles weep openly. Was promising to love someone knowing she would lose him. That kind of deliberate choice to embrace pain for the sake of connection was revolutionary to them. In the years that followed and became ambassadors for their united peoples, they traveled the galaxy together, with Jin Ho and Na as their honor guard. They helped establish cultural exchanges, trade agreements, and defense pacts. But more than that, they showed the galaxy something important. That connection transcended species, that love was stronger than logic, and that sometimes the shortest lives burned the. Learned to laugh at Jin Ho's terrible jokes. She learned to appreciate Na's awful cooking. She learned to see beauty in impermanent things, sunsets that would never come again, flowers that bloomed for a week, moments that existed only once. She learned that mortality wasn't a weakness but a gift, because it made every moment precious. And learned that love could exist across any divide. That courage came in many forms. That sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply choosing to care about someone different from yourself. They had children, 3 of them. The first human hybrids, carrying traits from both species. The children had their mother's bioluminescent markings and their father's stubborn determination. They would live longer than humans but not as long as, finding a balance between the two extremes. They became symbols of what was possible when different peoples chose connection over division. As grew older, his hair turning gray and his movements slower, cherished every moment. She took nothing for granted. Every morning she woke beside him was a gift. Every evening they spent together was precious. She learned the human art of living in the present, of finding joy in small things, of loving deeply despite knowing it would end. And when finally died at age 93, surrounded by his wife, his children, and his old friends Jin Ho and Na, held his hand and whispered thank you. Thank you for teaching her to live. Thank you for showing her that love was worth the pain of loss. Thank you for 50 years that meant more than her previous 300. She would go on to live thousands more years, long after everyone from that era had passed. But she never forgot the human warrior who taught an alien princess what it meant to truly be alive. And whenever anyone asked if she regretted choosing a love that she knew would end, she would smile and say no, because she would rather have had 50 years burning bright with than 10,000 years in the cold. And that made all the difference.